Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Environmental Science. It's good to see you. I'm glad that you are here joining us on a Saturday morning or early afternoon, depending on where you are. And if you are joining us in a replay, I am really happy that you're here, and I commend you for coming to Fiveable and studying and really helping yourself achieve what you wanted to achieve on this exam and in this class. And so no matter when you're watching this, you're already doing a great job really advocating for yourself. So I just wanted to say that to start us off. And let's see. So for today, I'm going to go ahead and open up our poll here. I want to know how confident you are feeling so far on our material. We're going to go over Unit 8 today. But we are, so that means we are, ending our journey through the content of environmental science. So one tree would be like the least confident, and 4 trees is going to be the most confident here. So let me know where you are feeling with what we have gone over so far. And you probably have gone over all of this content at this point in your class. You're probably doing review in your class as well. So that means like Unit 8 and 9 that we're going to go over here this week and next week. You'll probably have already seen that stuff, which will be cool because then you'll be able to say like, oh yeah, I know this. I've got this down. Or you'll be like, oh man, my teacher didn't talk about this at all, which will give you kind of a jumping off point, and then you can access some of those other resources that Fiveable has. So you can go and look at some of those study guides or different things. So I'm going to go ahead and get our slides shared here while you finish voting on that one. All right, and let's get these shared. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and publish our results here before we move on. Pretty across the board. No one's feeling 100%, but that's okay. I mean, we haven't gone over everything yet, and you probably haven't reviewed everything in your class yet either. So that's okay if you're not feeling 100% yet. And our people who are voting just one tree, hopefully we can go over some stuff in the next few weeks that help you feel a little bit more confident. And please do access the other resources we have for you, other than CRAM. So if you don't know what that is, on our website, we have like study guides that go unit by unit, and please jump into Discord and ask questions there. And then there are, past videos that you can watch as well too. So please reach out and let us help you in any way that we can, so we can boost that confidence level, because that is what we are here for. As always, if you don't want your name to be seen, please change your name in the chat or in any of our different programs that you participate in. If you don't want your real name used, you can use a pseudonym. Oh, sorry, let me get that pull out of the way here. Please join us on all of our social media platforms. Again, not just for your AP exam or just not for this AP exam, but for everything else that we offer. We offer a lot of college prep help, and we have different internships. And if you do well in your exams and feel confident, you can come back and be part of Fiveable as a TA. So just like our TA Miriam is here today joining us, and she's going to be able to answer some of your questions afterwards in Discord, as well as she's managing the chat here to help me out. That's something that you can do too if you're still interested. So don't let your Fiveable journey end with just helping you pass this exam. Have it be something that you can continue on with us. All right, so upcoming streams, we have one more content stream on the 17th, and then we are going to jump into free response help, and then our finale. So we are almost done here. We're almost through it. And trivia, Trivia is a great way for you to do multiple choice practice and see kind of where you're at. So the trivia for content that's going to be covered today is going to be tomorrow. They're always the day after the stream, and you have to be there at that time to participate. So that is East Coast time. So you will have to do the math to figure out what time it will be for your where you're located, what state you're in. But again, that's a really great way for you to see like how much you absorbed from what we're going to talk about today. And let me see, do I have the chat open here? There we go. Yep, our chat is open and Miriam is in there. So if you have any questions as we're going along, please put them in there and then just jump in and say hi too. So we know that you are here, and you guys can get to know each other a little bit too. All right, that is what we're going to talk about today. So it's a little bit intimidating. And in order to get through it all, I'm going to be talking kind of as fast as I can, really. I'm going to try and give you a base foundation of what each of those things are. And remember, with environmental science, as far as how it applies to the test, for everything, you have to think about like, what did humans do to damage like a natural system, right? So what did we do to change something that was natural? And so like backing up a little bit more, what was it naturally? What was happening? How did humans change it? And then how did that change in turn affect us? Like how have we made our life, I guess, worse really, based on how we've messed up an environmental system or something in that way. So that's kind of how you want to think of everything for environmental science, because that's what the questions are going to be in the multiple choice and on the FRQs. It's going to say like, what happened here, what was a cause of it, and then what was like a, what was a consequence of what humans had done. So you're always going to have kind of like tie in two things in order to get full points, definitely on the FRQs. So for us, as far as like what we're going to have time for, I'm just going to give you the basic like base knowledge of each of these things, and definitely take the time to go back and look at the slides again. They are linked underneath the presentation, so you can have those, and you can print those out and go back and for each of these think like, what was it beforehand, what did humans do, and then how has that affected humans? And that way you know that you're going to be ready, if there's a question on thermal pollution on the FRQ, you'll have something that you're ready to say. So kind of do that for each one of our slides, each topic. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right into talking about sources of pollution. So there's two ways to think about it: point source and non-point source. And it's fairly simple, but you can confuse yourself. So let's just take it slow for a second. So point source is a single identifiable source, like a smokestack or like an oil spill, right? So like the Exxon Valdez crashed into rocks and all the oil came out. And Exxon Valdez is a boat that crashed. And so that is one where the pollution came from, right? It came from the boat that crashed. Non-point source means there's multiple diffuse or like all over the place sources. And so I put these pictures in here on purpose because if you look at them like on a base level, they look the same, right? Like it's both like a pipe that's putting out pollution, right? So you could say, if you just looked at it very simply, oh, those are both point source, right? The pollution's coming out of the pipe. Well, not really. So that's where it gets a little bit tricky. That first one would be point source. So that's like a factory is putting out pollution and you know where it is and it's easy to identify, right? But if you look at the other one, that is a runoff like drainage tube from like the streets, right? So this is your streets are collecting a bunch of different pollutants, and it could be oil from cars, it could be fertilizer, it could be someone dumped a bunch of cleaning solution, someone washed their car, and so now there's like toxic soap and grease and stuff. So all of those different things are coming from different areas. So even though it's coming through like a tube here at the very end, and you can say like, oh yeah, it comes out of the tube, where did it originate, right? So it originated all over the place, all over the city, everywhere that people put any sort of pollution. People threw their fast food trash out their window of their car, and then that trash pollution got into the water. So we're talking about a ton of different things in different places, and you can't pinpoint it easily. So that's a good way to think about those two different things. And I know in those pictures, it looks like it would be the same thing, but it's not. So definitely take a minute when you encounter a question on like which one of these is point source to go back. Where is the original pollution coming from? And obviously, point source pollution is much easier to mitigate, or mitigate means to like reduce or take care of. So like, yeah, that factory is making too much pollution. All right, let's make them put like screens and scrubbers and different things in that exhaust pipe and reduce the pollution, right? And easy to take care of. But the other one, man, pollution's coming from all over the city. What do? It's going to be very difficult. You have to have like a law that says your car can't leak oil, and you have to try and catch people pouring stuff down the storm drains, and you got to try and find people for throwing trash out their window. So it's much more difficult to control non-point source pollutions. All right. So how has this, like in general, how have humans impacted ecosystems with pollution? So humans directly and indirectly impact aquatic systems, and these are some of the ways in which they do that. So these bullet points are a great like arsenal to have on the exam, like different things that you can say. So like there might be a question that says, name one way in which humans have impacted or polluted aquatic systems and how. So you could say, oh, sedimentation is the pollution, and the how is from deforestation and farming, right? So make sure, again, you've got it. The test always wants like two things and how they're linked. So these are a great group of things to have like in your back pocket, because they're probably going to be a question where you're going to need to state one of them. So again, by increasing water temperatures, increasing water acidity, sedimentation, oil spills, non-biodegradable trash. So biodegradable, bio means like life, and degradable means to degrade into like pieces. So things that can biodegrade just turn back into soil, right? So like a paper bag can biodegrade. Non-biodegradable means that it's not going to go back to the earth. So that's like plastics. They don't biodegrade. Eutrophication and dead zones. Remember, we talked about eutrophication before. Chemical contaminants, so spilling your soap from washing your car, and depleting freshwater sources. So again, reducing the amount of non-salt water that is going out into saltwater areas or that's moving across the land. All right, so let's jump right into endocrine disruptors. So talking about different kinds of pollutants or different kinds of, chemicals that we can interact with. One is called an endocrine disruptor. Try and think back to biology here of what endocrine means. Endocrine system is the internal hormonal system that regulates bodily functions. So your hormones, right? So anytime and then there's just like our biology picture. Remember, those are the different glands in your body that produce hormones. So anytime that you are going to be interacting, or an animal is going to be interacting with an endocrine disruptor, means that their natural hormonal systems are going to be disrupted or stopped. So some chemicals released into the environment will disrupt an organ's natural hormonal systems when ingested, so when they eat it. This can cause birth defects, developmental disorders, and gender imbalances, especially in fish. And that's because a lot of times fish change gender, so they'll start out as male and then they'll turn into a female as they get older, or typically the other way around. They'll start out as female and they'll turn into a male. So some of those include BPA or DDT. Those are endocrine disruptors. And BPA, that was a huge one, right? Because that's what we made plastic bottles with. And everyone was drinking out of these plastic bottles, and we thought it was like so great. And then we realized that it had endocrine disruptors and was causing birth defects and, damaging people's normal hormonal systems. So yeah, that's huge, right? Because everyone was drinking out of these plastic bottles. And now when you get a plastic bottle, it has like a sticker on it that says BPA free. And it's easy to say like, oh, great, well, they're safe now. And are they? Or do we just not know about what other chemicals are in there that are causing problems, right? We thought they were safe before until we learned about BPA. So something interesting to think about, especially when using plastic to wrap your food in or your water in, because we didn't know about BPA and we ingested a lot of it. Endocrine disruptors are particularly damaging to infants, either animals or humans, because right, like as a baby or as a teenager, your hormones are really important as you're growing, right? So it depends, it helps dictate your growth, it helps dictate different developmental aspects of who you are. So it's really important for little guys to not be affected by endocrine disruptors, whether that's animals or humans. All right, human impacts on wetlands and mangroves. And again, sorry this kind of jumps around. I'm just following the College Board like order of things. And again, too, I wanted to mention, if you are not familiar with the units we're using and like the College Board thing, that's perfectly fine. If your teacher did not use them, it doesn't matter. I'm sure your teacher covered all the material just in a different order. And to be honest, if I was teaching this in a class, I probably would as well, like not follow this order, just because, as you can see, it's very jumpy to go this order. So again, if you're like never heard of these units we're talking about, you are just fine. Your teacher did a great job covering all of the material, I'm sure. So let's talk about wetlands and mangroves. Wetlands are areas that are typically covered with shallow water that is a mix of fresh and salt water. Again, remember, fresh water means that it doesn't have salt. And so these like estuary type areas are typically where a river runs out into the ocean. And it's usually like think of like a large flat area that has like low amounts of water, but is a really, really beneficial environment for a lot of different reasons. So they provide a variety of ecosystem services. Water filtration is one. So a lot of times when the water stops moving quickly, so like a river is moving quickly, right? And then it hits this wetlands area and it kind of like spreads out and moves really slow. And that allows a lot of the toxins to kind of settle down to the bottom and get filtered out in the mud. So it's like a natural way to filter out pollutants. It's a breeding ground for a lot of animals. So birds, sharks, fish, like you name it, any animal that is like aquatic or, flies like around in these areas. It's a huge breeding ground for different ocean animals and different freshwater animals. It is a very unique habitat typically. So there's not very many of them because again, it's only places where like a river runs out into the ocean. They offer flood protection. Mangroves are these really cool trees that are able to actually like stop storm surges or like huge waves from a hurricane. So they protect the natural land. And it's interesting that they're literally the best possible solution to stop flooding from hurricanes. And we've removed them from like the majority of the places that they were. And then we have massive flooding and damage from storms when we have hurricanes, where if we would have just left like the natural mangrove forest there, it stops the beach or the waves from coming in. And again, when it does that, that prevents beach erosion from happening. So humans have altered these areas for land development typically because this is like an awesome place to live, right? It's typically where there's like a river and a beach, and it would be so cool to put condos up. And then also from farm runoff. So we have like massive amounts of nitrogen, again, flooding in from farms and sedimentation from farms, and that damages these natural areas. Let's see, and that is a picture of mangroves, just in case you haven't seen them. They have these crazy roots. They're one of like a very few amount of like vascular plants that can live in salt water. Very few vascular plants can live in salt water. So they can, and they do it with these like really cool roots that pop up and allow them to get oxygen. So they live, so trees submerged in ocean water, which they're really, I think, are the only tree. And then as far as like plants, it's like that and seagrass are really the only things. Other than that, it's going to be algae, so not vascular plants. All right, again, there's a lot of words on this slide, and I did that on purpose with this image because I want you to be able to go back and study it, because you'll need to know this process like the back of your hand, because there's going to be questions on it. So you have to know this step by step. And we've talked about it so many times already that I'm not going to like read those for you, because that's a study tool for you to come back to. In general, eutrophication happens when you have a too much fertilizer, so nitrogen and phosphorus, put on a farm. When it rains, the excess is washed into a waterway. Then again, you've now fertilized the waterway, and algae, which is a plant, is super excited and grows. So you have a ton of algae growing. And then when the algae runs out of that nutrient, it's going to die. When it dies, it sinks to the bottom and decomposes. Decomposition is an aerobic process, meaning it uses oxygen. So decomposition is bacteria eating those dead algae. They are breathing, and essentially breathing. They're metabolizing. So they breathe up all of the oxygen in the water. Now the water is called hypoxic, meaning it doesn't have any oxygen in it, and that causes all the fish to die, and that's a dead zone. So I know that was a crazy amount of things to say, but you've got to be able on the test to say that back, right? Eutrophication, the process. So that's why I've written it down there for you. Step by step, what is eutrophication? How does it happen? And what does it cause? Dead zones. And so the Gulf of Mexico is a very, very famous area with a dead zone, a huge dead zone, because of all of the toxins coming in from the Mississippi River. And that's what like a eutrophied river would look like. So you can see that algae is completely blotting out the sun from anything growing below it. It's a very happy green plant right now. Algae is just a plant, so it's very happy, but it is going to die eventually when it uses up all of the nutrients, and it is going to sink to the bottom and make that a dead zone. All right, thermal pollution. Thermal pollution is when humans alter the natural temperature of a waterway. Typically, this happens in a area that has like a factory. So factories are allowed to pull water from a natural area to use it to cool down the system, and then put it right back. Again, they're not adding a pollutant as far as like chemicals to the water, so it should be fine, right? We're just like sucking water in from a river. We're going to run it through our machinery to cool down the machinery and put it right back. We're not polluting the water as far as like chemicals, but they do cause the water's hot now, right? Because you're putting it back. And so you can see all of those little manatees are chilling right next to the exhaust pipes of these factories because they think it is the best ever, right? It's like a hot tub. They love it. And so you'd think, well, I mean, they're happy. There's no harm, right? But if something goes wrong in the factory and they have to shut down, and by factory, it's probably a power plant, really. So, like a coal burning power plant type thing. But it could be a factory, I guess. Anyways, if they have to shut it down and the water stops, all of those manatees could die because they're going to be like instantly submerged back into cold water. And that quick temperature change, it can kill them. And it does. This happens frequently. So again, that's an issue. And typically thermal pollution does affect other organisms, but like the most famous one is the manatees in Florida being affected. So you can see them all swimming around right next to the little heat source. Poor little guys. And manatees are, they face other issues as well, just because they're super friendly. They're like not afraid of humans. And yeah, they just people, they'll swim right up to you. And they want you to like scratch their back and stuff, because see how they have like that algae on them. They're really friendly. And so that kind of leads to them dying from being hit by boats or, other issue. One of the leading causes of death for manatee is actually choking on stuff, because humans try and feed them like candy or different foods that they can't eat, and they choke, which is just silly. Poor little manatees. But again, so that is that's thermal pollution and an example of an organism that is affected by it. All right, so let's talk about persistent organic pollutants, POPs. You will definitely see this on the test. So these are synthetic carbon-based molecules that do not easily break down. So they are persistent, right? They do not easily break down. Examples of these, again, would be DDT. I feel like if there's any sort of like pollutant and you're just guessing on something, DDT is a pretty good guess. And PCBs, which are like coolants. Because they do not break down, they travel long distances and bioaccumulate in the body of organisms. And typically they can cause cancer. And in the Stockholm Convention in 2001, countries agreed to limit the use of persistent organic pollutants. So that was a law. Well, I don't know if you can call it a law. It's an agreement between different countries that they chose to go into together. And we are going to talk about bioaccumulation more in depth. So again, this is just something that does bioaccumulate. And then we'll talk about what bioaccumulation is and why that, does really impact humans as well. Okay, so bioaccumulation. So some persistent organic pollutants and other substances like mercury do not leave an organism's body quickly. So if you ingest these things or mercury, it's going to stay in your body maybe forever, or maybe it will, slowly metabolize out. But typically they don't. Typically it does just kind of accumulate forever. And then how it accumulates in your system is by, eating other organisms that have absorbed it or have eaten it as well. So as you move up the food chain, organisms have a greater concentration of these substances. So I put our energy pyramid in there to kind of think about again, like, remember we talked about how much or like a mass of organisms on the bottom you would need to support more organisms as you moved up. It's like the opposite numbers really, as far as like how much energy is moving up. So let me break this down a little bit better. So you would need like 100 pounds of grass to make 10 pounds of a like cow meat that would then support 1 pound of like human as you were growing, right? So if you want a human that is 150 pounds, you'd have to like go backwards and think about how many pounds of grass or how many pounds of organisms underneath that. And let's pull this other thing up here. So it's the opposite then as you're accumulating or bioaccumulating these chemicals, right? Because you have to eat so much of whatever is below you that's going to have to eat so much more and so much more below that. So let's talk about it in terms of the ocean. I think that's a good way to think about it. So if you have on that lower level, let's talk about phytoplankton, right? So you have phytoplankton that are absorbing mercury, right? So you can have 1 part per million, which is what that stands for, per individual little phytoplankton, right? So, and you have thousands of little phytoplankton. And then you have the next one up is zooplankton. So those are like little animals. And each zooplankton is eating like 100, or let's say 10, is eating 10 phytoplankton, right? So they've now have 10 parts per million because they absorb all of the mercury from each thing they've eaten. Okay, so now on the next stage up, we could say we're talking about like anchovies. So let's say each anchovy then eats 10 of those little zooplankton, and now each anchovy has 100 parts per million of mercury. So then the next level up, we could say a tuna, and that tuna is going to eat 10 anchovies, and now that tuna has 1,000 parts per million of mercury. And then if you went up another level and you'd say, okay, we're going to have sharks that are eating 10 tuna each, and then those sharks have 10,000 parts per million of mercury. And then you have a human who says, oh, I'm going to eat shark. And then that human has like 100,000 parts per million of mercury. You see how that works? So like every level that you go up and the amount of organisms that you eat at these different levels is going to increase your absorption of these toxins. And this absolutely happens. That's why we say like you shouldn't eat certain animals in the ocean. So you shouldn't eat like a shark or something because they have so much mercury because they've eaten all of these different levels of food chain below them. And then like you definitely shouldn't eat like a ton of shark, right? Because if you eat a ton of different sharks, then you're going to be eating a ton of mercury. And the ocean is kind of a unique ecosystem as well because it does have so many trophic levels. And again, trophic levels is every time you jump up a level in the pyramid here. Whereas like on land, you might just have like a deer eating grass. And so that would have been that first level, right? That would have been a zooplankton eating a phytoplankton. And then you would eat the deer. So you are now the tertiary or third level. Whereas in the ocean, by the time you get something, like by the time you eat a tuna, that thing could have eaten, it could be the sixth, level. So it has a massive amount of those toxins in it. And if you are going to eat seafood, you should probably eat something that is very low on the food chain, like a anchovy, and not like a apex predator, which is also unique with our seafood consumption, right? We as humans don't really eat like apex predators like on land. So like you don't eat tigers, you don't eat wolves, you don't eat bears typically. Sometimes we do eat bears, I guess, but for the most part, we don't eat the predators, right? We eat like deer and cow. But with ocean things, the like high level predators are really high value things that we eat. So like we eat tuna, we eat sharks, we eat salmon, we eat high level predators instead of eating those lower level organisms, which is really interesting to think about. So that is one way that oceanic organisms that we eat cause us to bioaccumulate those chemicals in our bodies that they have accumulated in their bodies. All right, so let's keep moving right along here, talking about solid waste disposal. So solid waste disposal, this is trash collection. This is going to be a landfill. It can be incinerated or it can be like dumped in the ocean. And I know that's kind of crazy to think about, right? Like, but it still happens. So for the most part, the US like doesn't do this anymore, and a lot of more industrialized countries don't, but a lot of countries don't have the means to create a landfill. So like let's just pause for a second and think about what a landfill really is. Whenever you throw something away, it doesn't go away, it just goes somewhere else. So instead of like, imagine if we didn't have trash pickup, like everything that you guys would throw away, that like large trash can full of trash every week, it would just be piling up in your backyard, right? So you'd be like, oh man, we'd be like over flooded with trash, right? Well, we are over flooded with trash. You just can't see it because typically trucks come and take it, away from your house. But there are massive areas where we just dig like a huge hole in the ground. Typically, we put down plastic so that chemicals and different gross things don't run away from the trash and get into our waterways. So typically we put down plastic and we have like systems to suck out like the chemicals. And then we fill it up and then we bury it. And then we like turn the top into like a park or something afterwards. And then we dig a new hole and bury it. So it's just like this weird system where we just bury our trash in these giant holes. And that's what a landfill is. But some countries don't like have the means to do that. Like it's really expensive to have like a trash truck come to your house and pick that up and then dig a giant hole and put down plastic and like run the system and bury it. Sometimes, it's easier to just throw it in the ocean, right? So that it definitely happens. And it used to happen like in the US as well. So let me see if I might have two pictures here or just one. Okay, let's talk about this first picture that showed up first. So this picture here on the right now, if you look very closely, this is called Glass Beach. And there are different glass beaches. I believe this one is in Northern California. I've been there. I just don't remember where it was. I think it was Northern California. Anyways, what this was, this is an old like landfill, right? So what they used to do is it's kind of like there's like a cliff down into to get down in there. So like they would pick up the trash, right? And then take it over to this like specific cliff in the ocean and then just throw it in, right? And like right now we'd be like, oh my gosh, that's horrifying. You can't just like throw your trash in the ocean. You know, we do all these like beach cleanups and all this stuff. But at the time, think about it, this was before there was plastic, right? So this was when your trash consisted, if you like think about your trash right now, if plastic didn't exist, what would you be throwing away, right? You would be throwing away paper, glass, metal, right? So those things, paper is going to dissolve right into the ocean and break down fairly quickly. Glass is going to break up into tiny little pieces, and glass is essentially just like sand, right? So glass is made out of sand, so that kind of just goes back naturally. And then metal is going to like rust and sink down into the earth and kind of just like go back into the earth, right? That's where it came from. So it's not exactly the same thing as throwing trash in the ocean now. And this beach that was like a landfill, you can go there and the entire beach is glass. It's called Glass Beach. And it's just tiny little pieces of glass that have been broken down over time, 50 years, 60 years. And it doesn't really seem polluted, right? Obviously, like we wouldn't want to be dumping chemicals in there. But as far as like solid waste, those different pieces, it only became like an issue when we made plastic, because plastic does not break down. If it does break down with photodegradation or with the sun breaking it down, it just breaks down into teeny, 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 tiny pieces that float. And that's the big difference. Glass and metal sink. Plastic floats. And so it's going to float around on the top layer of the ocean in these tiny little pieces that don't go away, or if they do, they just like release their chemicals into the water. So that was like a huge changing point in solid waste disposal, was plastic, right? And now if you think about it, like the majority of the stuff that we get and throw away is plastic, whether it's like filamental plastic or a plastic water bottle, or like things that you don't even think are plastic are plastic. You know, a lot of our clothes are made out of plastic. Just like camping chairs are made out of plastic, probably like curtains. I'm trying to think of like literally like anything, baby diapers, like all of this stuff has plastic components to it that didn't used to. Things like just didn't used to be made of plastic. So now that's a huge issue. All right, so then that's like our new picture, right? Like this is what it looks like when there's trash in the ocean now, and it's all just like little pieces of plastic, right? So that's like you can compare like pre-plastic and post-plastic and what that looks like as far as like if you dumped it in the ocean and it is kind of like on the beach. So a big difference, right? And let me just go back to that really quick. So for solid waste disposal, you're going to need to know like the different pieces of a landfill. So that is something definitely, if you feel uncomfortable with, you're going to want to go back and look at that a little bit more in depth as far as like the liners, the tubing that's used. There's special tubing to remove methane as things decompose. So definitely go back and take a look at that as well if you feel like you didn't learn that yet. Okay, so the next one is sewage treatment. And for this one, I do have a picture of all of the stages for you, but I just don't feel like it's a good investment of our time for me to go over like all of the different steps with you. But I did include a video there. So that's a QR code. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with them. If you're not, just go to the camera on your phone and point it at that, and it will take you to that video. And it goes step by step what you need to know. So they say it as well as I could have. So I think it's just a better use of our time for you guys to go watch that video kind of when we're done. And then come back and let us know if you have any questions on the different stages. For the most part, what we're talking about here with sewage treatment, this is like things that go down the toilet. And then in some cities, it's also what's outside in the storm drain. Some cities, the storm drain is a separate system, and some it's not, and that can lead to huge problems. And so that's kind of what I'd rather talk about. So like for the most part, sewage treatment, it goes into the plant. All of the solids are going to be taken out. So like there's big grates that pull any solids that go down the toilet out. So like toilet paper and other things, and it's going to take it to the landfill, right? So that stuff like doesn't when you like flush toilet paper, it doesn't like decompose in the water and like turn back into water. And but no, it's going to get scooped out, which is kind of weird to think about. Like, why do we even put it in there if it's then just going to get scooped out and taken to the landfill anyways? But that's what happens. And then the water itself is going to be purified. So we're going to use different systems. And again, that video is going to talk more in depth about them, use of algae and bacteria to break down all of the like human waste. And then once it is clean water, then it's typically put back into a large body of water. So it kind of like dissipates as well. Or sometimes cities use it to like water plants or different things around the city. So it's not deemed like okay for human consumption, but it probably is okay for human consumption by the end process. It is very, very clean when they either dump it back like in a large lake or in the ocean. Okay, so this is like more of what I wanted to talk about because it's kind of like a bigger environmental issue. So in cities, and I think it's something like 800 or something US cities follow this system where the storm drains outside are linked to the sewer treatment centers. So, okay, so anytime you flush the toilet, that's going to that wastewater treatment plant, right? And under like a normal amount of toilet flushing, it can handle all of that water that's coming in from the city, right? So everything's good to go. But in these certain cities where it filters the water that's coming in from the storm drains, if you have like a huge weather event where it rains like a ton, it's going to overwhelm the system, right? Like it can't process all of that water at that rate, and it's just going to like bypass the system. So they have like an emergency bypass. Otherwise it would like flood the whole plant. So like raw sewage, like toilet paper and everything else that goes down the toilet is going to just run out into that main body of water with all the rainwater. And like environmentally speaking, it's like, well, it's really diluted, right? Because we had like this massive storm to kind of like that caused it, right? So like you have like all of this water and then like, one toilet bowl full of waste. It's pretty diluted, so it's probably fine. But on the other hand, like that's not fine. Would you want to go swimming in the ocean right after all of the raw sewage just got dumped in it? And it's not fine. Like there's high potential for disease and contaminants and all of that just nutrients as far as the wastewater, so the nitrogen and stuff is going to be dumped into the ocean or the lake. So this is actually like a huge issue, and you will see I know because I used to live in Los Angeles, that's why I have a lot of examples from there, but where the wastewater treatment center is in Los Angeles, if there is a massive storm, you'll see these signs that say like, don't go in the ocean. And it's just kind of like a thing, like everybody knows, like you don't go swimming after it has like a big rainstorm. You don't want to go in the ocean. And that's because of the sewage overflow system, but also because of all of the pollution. Like especially in Los Angeles, like if it doesn't rain for a month, think about how much pollution is in the streets, right? Like how much oil and who knows what, that's all going to get washed out into the ocean after it rains. Like you do not want to get in that water. So this is just kind of like an interesting thing that is not necessarily always talked about in environmental science classes or in your books. So I wanted to make sure I talked more about this, and then you guys can go back and watch that video to learn about the waste treatment centers. But again, just like the trash, like the landfills, you're going to want to know the steps because that's very high possibility of that appearing on the test. All right, so let's keep moving right along here. We're doing a great job. All right, so let's talk about lethal dose 50. I'm going to give you a chance to just read this slide while I drink some water. I'm talking a lot today. Okay, so lethal dose 50 is the amount of any toxin that would kill 50% of any given population. These amounts are calculated in controlled conditions and used to set exposure standards. So this would say, okay, so what amount of like DDT exposure would kill 50% of a population of whatever organisms. And then you can kind of like backtrack from there and say like how much, is an acceptable exposure amount, for humans or for different animals, or like how much pollution, because all of the regulations that we have are calculated, like what is a acceptable safe amount of whatever toxin it is, whether it's in our drinking water or in our air, or toxins on our clothes or food storage containers, like what is an acceptable amount of toxin. And then too, like dependent where you are, different states have different regulations and different laws. California has specific laws that, say like you can't have certain kind of contaminants or different things like that. And US has different laws than other countries. So again, that's kind of like how they're calculated. And this is like another way that these things are calculated. So the dose response curve is a way of looking at the degree of reaction to varying levels of a stressor, usually a toxin, but it could be heat, pressure, sound, or any other environmental condition. This is to identify how much of a stressor an individual or group of individuals can tolerate. So this is that same idea, really, is looking at how much of whatever stress, whatever toxin or issue you can push onto a group of organisms before, like, are they going to be really sick? Are they going to get cancer? Are they going to be sick to the point where they can't complete their like life processes, or would they die? So that's your maximum effect range, is where they would like be so affected that they would die. So that is the dose response curve. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about pollution and how, again, this is kind of going back to that system of how we want to think about things, is how it affects our health when we do encounter these different pollutants. So here are some different examples of how we can be affected by these different pollutants. And for the most part, different pollutants that we are going to see are either going to be like a endocrine disruptor, right? Different pollutants cause cancer, asthma or lung cancer, or like dysentery is a disease caused by untreated sewage. And then mesothelioma is a specific cancer from asbestos. And again, remember we talked about asbestos, and it's a substance that was used to build houses. So for the most part for this, you want to look at, what are the different pollutants? How are they being put into our environment? And then like what specifically would those pollutants cause us? And I don't imagine the test is going to want you to know like specifically, like a doctor would, oh, this is going to cause cancer and this one causes asthma. But in general, it might say increasing air pollutants would cause, which of the following or what type of issues. And so for the most part, that's going to be like asthma, possibly lung cancer, issues with eye irritation. So things like that. So I wouldn't be too stressed about this, other than maybe the endocrine one. Know that endocrine means hormones. So an endocrine disruptor is specifically going to cause things with like reproductive or birth defects or development of young people or young animals. So definitely don't stress too much about linking these together, but just in general, these are things that are caused by pollutions in our environment. All right, and then the last one we're probably super familiar with now, with everything that's going on in our world right now with the pandemic. So Pathogens and infectious diseases, these are other things that we encounter. So a pathogen is going to be a bacteria, virus, or a microorganism that can cause disease. So a pathogen is anything that can cause us like a disease. And in our pictures there, I have a picture of a bacteria. Bacteria are fairly large. They are like a cell, a little organism. Bacteria can be fought with antibiotics. A virus cannot. Antibiotics typically work on the cell membrane of a bacteria, the peptidoglycan cell membrane, you might remember from biology, is ruptured by antibiotics. So that's how it doesn't hurt the cells in your body, because you are eukaryotic, not prokaryotic. And that's kind of how that works. And the other picture I have there is a picture of a coronavirus. So viruses, again, they are not considered like a cell. They are more of like a body that injects DNA and takes over your cells and uses your cells to reproduce. So they can't be fought with like a drug. The only way to really fight a virus is to use your own immune system. Your body is really good at fighting viruses. And in order to help your body, what you can do is get a vaccine. What a vaccine is it contains either like it depends on how that individual virus reproduces. Or not how it reproduces, but how your body fights it. So you have to like identify what the virus is and how your body naturally fights it, and then we can develop a vaccine. So your body, either the vaccine is going to be like a piece of the DNA or the dead outside of the virus, so your body can recognize the shape. But either way, in general, a vaccine is showing your body, hey, look at this virus. In a way that's not going to harm your body. So it's like a dead piece of it. So, hey, look at this virus and be ready for it when you encounter it, right? And then that's why you get a booster, because the first time you're like, okay, here's a little bit of it. And then you get a booster, and that's why you get or can get really sick from the second vaccine, right? Because then your body's like, oh, hey, I know what this is. And I'm going to have a reaction to it. And your body like gets sick, right? You get like the flu. Because your body is mounting a very strong response to that virus the second time. But again, it's like a fake virus. So it's like a fake sickness, and then you'll be fine like the next day. And then your third exposure would be like when you actually would meet someone with the virus and you would absorb it into your system, and your body would be like, oh no, I've seen this twice. I know what to do, and would immediately take care of the virus before you get sick. So you might not get sick at all then when you're actually exposed to it. Or if you do get sick, you're not going to get as sick as you would have before, because your body is prepared to fight it. So that is how vaccines work, and kind of take care of the virus for us. So typically, but not always, these things originate in warm equatorial areas with different species interacting with each other. And that is because that has the potential to form like a new organism. So a new disease, that's how they are formed. So when you have like organisms that can share diseases easily. So humans tend to be able to share diseases with pigs and bats. And, there are other different organisms as well, like monkeys. So when for some reason, we can share diseases, we have very similar diseases with these animals. And so when we interact with them, there's the potential for the two different viruses to combine their DNA and then become a new virus. And that is how that happens. Sometimes infectious diseases spread faster in poorer areas because they lack access to sanitation facilities or medical support. So sometimes areas that don't have access to running clean water and antibacterial soap, or antiviral soap, are going to spread these diseases much faster because they don't have the access to like wash their hands that we have access to here, or like what's it called, like hand sanitizer. They don't have access to those kinds of things. Same thing with medical support. They might not have access to vaccines or going to the doctor or isolating. I think that if you got sick in the US, a lot of times, if we had the means, you can just kind of like lock yourself in your house and you can Uber Eats food to yourself and you can not infect anybody else. But if you are living in a one room house with a lot of other family members and you don't have a means to get away from everybody, then disease is going to spread very quickly. All right. And these are the major, like, important diseases that you will need to know for the exam, like where they, what they are, what sickness they can cause. And definitely, it takes about 2 years or so for them to write each new exam. So in 2 years, coronavirus will definitely be on the exam, but I don't imagine it will be on there for you guys yet. So you wouldn't have to worry about that one. But these are the ones that are on there right now or that could be on there. So definitely take the time to go back and look at these and be able to understand what's unique about each one and what spreads each one and like what effects it would cause for humans. All right, we have made it here to the end. We have one more unit. I'm going to throw our final poll up here. Complete that statement. I need more help with climate change or ozone depletion. If you had to choose between those two. Unit 9 is my favorite unit because I feel like it just really gets into how humans have significantly changed the earth. And I feel like it also is our best call to action. It gives us what we can do to make a difference as far as protecting our natural ecosystems and making sure things stay the way that they are now and the way that we have them. Unit 9 can also be a little bit hard to take in. It can be a little depressing. So we will tackle that together and, we'll take it one step at a time because it can be kind of depressing to see how big of an impact we have had on our planet. And I think really the part that's hard to swallow is it probably wasn't you, we are inheriting a planet and a system that has been pretty significantly damaged by people who came before us. And that is sometimes really sad to think about, and it's hard to move forward. So we will look at these things and we will see how, what we can do to make things better. All right, so we are seeing 100% here. We need more help with climate change. And do not worry, we will go into that in depth and how you will see that kind of evaluated on the test and to be prepared to answer that if it does come up in an FRQ. And you know what, we'll probably, now that I know you guys want help with that, we will probably, for our FRQ review, I will try and find one specifically on climate change so we can kind of tackle the content twice in that way. All right, everybody, it has already been an hour. Thank you so much for joining me. Hide that. And again, please follow us on our social media platforms, and I'm going to have our link here for Discord. If you have not yet joined, please do bring any questions that you have there, and definitely feel free to jump in and help other people as well if anyone else has a question. In addition, we do have our discussion threads open now, so if you want to pose a question underneath the video here, we will get back to you with an answer. So try and, if you can, post those questions well in advance of our streams, and I will be able to see them kind of before we go live and be able to talk about it with you too. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us, and I will see you next